Hello, and welcome to Two Pews in a Pod. Join us as we explore faith in a modern world at Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Now, here is your host, Pastor Paul Baglios.
I am Megan Wyatt.
And I'm Paul Baglios.
Welcome to this episode of Two Pews in a Pod. Today is the 6th of 8 in a series on faith and vocation. And today we are exploring the vocation of education. And we have two great members from our congregation with us today, Lindsay Hoffman and Carl Kidd. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and your life to come and be here with us for this. And why don't we start by you telling us a little bit about your educational background?
Sure. I went to Shippensburg University in Pennsylvania, and when I graduated there, I tried really hard to get a job in PA, but it was pretty impossible. I subbed in the school system I went to as a kid, and so I was trying. It wasn't working out, so I applied to Frederick County, Maryland, because my husband now at the time, he's from Gettysburg, so we came to Frederick a lot when I was visiting him. So applied to Frederick County, got an interview, got a job, and I've been here ever since. So it's 16 years. I started in the classroom in first grade. I taught first, fourth, and fifth for 10 years. And then the last 6 years, I've been a math specialist. I'm still at the same school, and I serve pre-K to second grade.
Wow.
I work mostly with teachers for professional learning, but I also carry intervention hours with students in the classroom.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, so I did my undergraduate degree at Frostburg State in biology and chemistry. I was going to be a doctor and then fell in love with the classroom. I started my career in private school teaching 5th and 6th grade and then moved down to 2nd. I was in the elementary classroom for 17 years and then moved to the high school where I teach environmental science and biology.
Well, it's wonderful to have both of you here. And we were talking earlier before we began this recording, so I'm going to evoke again my tendency to be nerdy.
Okay.
Often in scriptures, in the gospel narratives of the New Testament, Jesus is addressed as rabbi, which is a Hebrew word meaning teacher. And I think of that as very symbolic of the sacred work that teachers do, the way teachers are tending the well-being of God's creation. My wife is a teacher, in addition to being also a Lutheran pastor. Our daughter and son-in-law are educators in Oakland, California. Teaching has been close to my life my whole life. And I'm wondering if you might be willing to comment on how you experience, or if you experience, how you might reflect upon the sacredness or the holiness of your work, and how your work is really part of God's ongoing care, unfolding care for the well-being of creation and its inhabitants, if that's not too lofty. And we can change it to something else, but I'm curious to throw that one out there. Ready? Go, Lindsay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I would say that just being, as a teacher, and I know as an elementary school teacher especially, you spend so many hours with your students in the classroom and you become, another caregiver for them. So building those relationships with them, helping them to be able to build relationships with their friends and other trusted adults, and just seeing how they grow and change in that year with you. And then if you have the experience, when I was teaching second grade, to then watch them grow as elementary school students and go on into middle and high school and furthering their education or careers, you become a small part of that journey. And I think that's where some of that sacredness or holiness would come in, because you're helping to mold who they become. You become someone who is helping to instill those morals and beliefs and in our classroom, we had 3 rules only, respect yourself, respect others, and respect the environment you're in. And, we talked about the environment you in can be anything from the bathroom stall to the classroom to the cafeteria to outdoors.
Yeah.
And, ways that you respect yourself in order to respect others and vice versa. So I think that's where a lot of it comes in. And, in the high school classroom this year, I'm learning that our kids just come with so much baggage, so much past trauma, so much past experience, and they're still kids and they're still looking for someone who's going to listen to them and meet them where they are and help them to grow and kind of figure out where they're headed next. And, in my 18 years of teaching, to see students come back, I have former students who are doctors and lawyers. I have former students who are the most amazing parents in the world. I have former students who have come back and been teachers in the building with me. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing to see, what do they become and where do they go? I mean, some of my former students are professional athletes. Some are entrepreneurs. One of my former students has been flipping houses all over the country with his mom and dad. That's what they do. So it's just really cool to see where they head and to know that you played a part in that.
Yeah. You become part of their story.
Yeah.
Right. And all I think of is the sower, right? Sowing those seeds and not knowing always what the outcome is going to be.
I think too, depending on the type of school that you're in, going along with the relationship part of it, for some kids, you are the most important part of their life because they might be going home to a situation that's not ideal. And so they come to school and you are their sacred person.
Their safe person.
Their safe person.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, is a really big part of teaching as well.
Both of you have talked about relationships. And I know that both of you also have great depth of knowledge. You have your own competencies of content and material and subject matter that you teach. It's noteworthy to me that each of you leads in your comments with the importance of relationships. And I would think that's absolutely vital.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the strong points in the school that I'm in is that's the number one thing in a classroom, right? You're not going to have management of a classroom if you don't have relationships with kids, you respecting them respecting you, them respecting each other, like you were saying before about all of that. So building a relationship with each individual student and then also your class as a whole is just a huge part of the job.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to see in public education, especially when I first started, you started day one with curriculum and you were teaching from the get-go. Right. And it's so wonderful to see that, from the top down in our public school system, relationship building has become the new focus of the beginning of the year. Yeah. That is the number one goal for every administrator, I feel within our county is building those relationships and understanding your kids and understanding what they're bringing to the table and where you can meet them and help them and guide them.
Yeah, the social, emotional learning of school is right up there with the academics at this point in where we are in the world.
So I was a teacher for 6 years. That's I think my deepest call and vocation is teaching, whether it's what I do now and when I worked in the public school and other things. But one activity we did early in my first year or second year is we had a day where we had all the names of the kids, and I don't remember who led it, but we went through and we checked who, and it was midway through the year, who did we interact with, which kids, what names, and it was really fascinating to see that there were certain children that probably were outgoing, probably were really easy to spend time with, who had everybody saw and talked to them that day. All the staff, for the most part, they talked to everybody. And then to see where those holes were, right? And it was never surprising then to look at the names of the kids who didn't have a single check. And you immediately thought oh, that's a child, right? That maybe we need to lean into. Maybe it's a personality, maybe it's a shyness, maybe they have rough edges that we want to, that we can address. But it was really fascinating to see how we can be really complacent about relationships, right? But what we do is pay attention to who's not there and who's needing more.
That sheds light on something you were teaching us, Megan, staff and council members a few months ago, about how do we pay attention to who we're not paying attention to? How do we notice where our attention has not fallen?
Yeah.
And you said a moment ago also that teachers become part of the stories of their students. And I think you're also helping them write their stories, helping them become the authors of their stories, increasing their capacity to do that.
I mean, I think I can think of those teachers, right, and name them, like Miss Olson in second grade, who I was going through a really tough patch with dyslexia and all the things, and just handled me with grace and love. And I don't know where she is in the world, but literally changed my life. So I don't know if if you all have stories like that too, of educators that inspired you.
Yeah, my third grade teacher, he was and it was a male, which I think is also something to talk about, like how important that is. I mean, at the time, and when I was in elementary school, we didn't have any male teachers at our school. So when he came along and he was my teacher, I mean, it was just, we had a great relationship. We had that bond. And he just was super fun. And it was a great year for me. And then when I was subbing, when I first graduated college, I subbed at the school he was working at the time. So it was really cool to come full circle for that. So, and I could name 100 more, so.
Yeah, for me, it was my second grade teacher, Miss Joan Whitlock. She actually taught my father sixth grade. So it was really cool to then have her in her last year of teaching. And she was an amazing woman. She fought breast cancer while she was teaching us. And I guess my most pivotal moment was we had goldfish in the classroom, and one of our goldfish died. And all the kids were freaking out and were crying and were upset about the goldfish. And she went into her closet and she grabs a shovel, like a little garden trowel, and she scoops the fish out and she takes us outside and she digs a hole under the tree. She puts the fish in the ground and covers it up. And she's like, here it is, kids. We were born, we live, we die, and that's just the facts of life. And then we went in and did math like nothing had happened. And she was just magical that way. Yeah. Like, she was just an awesome human being.
I mean, teachers are magical.
They are.
Yeah.
We are magical.
You are magical.
We are magical.
And you just, that's your day. You just roll with it. And I feel like that's, that's a perfect way to say
You were the magic
they're
makers.
magical.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you and I often use another M word, miracle, about what we observe in the life of this congregation.
Yes.
And we often say miracles every day.
Yeah.
Thinking of this past Sunday morning, for example, and the things that we're going to carry in our memory. And I'm wondering if each of you have some, even if it's just one, story that you're able to share of when you saw the magic or the miracle happen for one of the people entrusted to your teaching, the sort of thing that lifts you and carries you when it's really difficult and stressful and maybe not quite as intensely satisfying.
For me, I would say it was actually a more, I mean, I have many, but one that has stuck with me recently is last school year, I had the opportunity to work in the evening program of our alternative high school. And I was working with some tough kids who had a lot of past trauma, a lot of just not great school experiences. And it was interesting to meet with this one young man, and we were out in the portable and trying to teach him environmental science, and he was just fascinated about this jar, and he brought in this jar that he had scooped out some pond water, and he's holding the jar and I'm like, well, what have you learned about environmental science? He's like, I don't know anything. And I was like, well, tell me about your jar. And so he's telling me about how all the different algae grew and how the community worked together. And he's just like basically teaching himself the entire concept through this jar. And it was interesting because he was a kid who didn't show up except for Tuesdays and Thursdays. And those were the days that we had environmental science. And it was just a way to connect with him. And there was another young lady there who was so into cosmetology. And when I told her that my daughter was into cosmetology, she was like, oh, that's so cool. And, I was telling her stories about my own daughter, and, it was making her want to come. And I got an email from her this year that she made honor roll for the first time.
That's awesome.
And so it was that experience in that school and seeing the kids who need the relationships the most really changed my thought on teaching. And, the schoolwork is important and the routine is important, but meeting them where they are, I think, is the most important. And letting them share their story when they're ready and using that as a motivation is huge.
Yeah.
When I taught fourth grade, it was a difficult year. I will say it was a difficult class. So I worked really hard on relationships and, teamwork and all of this all together. And so at the end of the year, I had my group of kids write like a little thing for the next year's class. Like it had some different questions, like what to expect from their teacher and all this stuff. And Habram was his name. He wrote on there, "This class is a family, so
Oh my gosh.
don't mess it up." So that
Lindsay.
I can't even say that. Yeah. So that was like,
Right.
pivotal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Magical.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
When I think especially like when you hear and when you get kids who didn't have those experiences,
Yes.
right? To
Oh my
see that
gosh,
they've hit or just didn't connect with teachers or classes or had those things, we see how that's lasting. Like I know we all have those things too. You have the bright moments where you felt seen, and then you have the years that you just, you floundered,
Yeah.
So the importance of what you do, it is so sacred, the holy ground of the classroom.
Definitely.
Yeah.
When you spoke earlier, Carl, about the baggage that students bring with them. And I'm wondering, I realize that certainly the traumas of our recent pandemic have contributed to baggage for all of us in the world. But I'm wondering if you think the quality and quantity of baggage is more or different than you've seen at other times.
Yeah, I don't know that it's more or different. I think kids or any of us go through the same types of things. I just wonder at this point now that it's more talked about. So maybe
Right.
it's just it's coming to the forefront more than it did in the past. I'm not sure, but I don't know that it's
That is
more or
interesting.
different
Yeah.
because when I first started teaching, I had kids that went through the same things that we have kids going through now.
Yeah, I would say it's not so much, the recent events of the pandemic and those things. I would say, I think, A, it's more talked about, and B, I'm noticing with our older students, it's the over-connectedness that we have now
That's very
with
true.
online platforms. So a lot more is out there.
Yeah.
And I think they're
When
experiencing
that news, right?
a
The
lot
news
different things. and-
nonsense. You're constantly getting
Yes.
bad news, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Around the world, things that we never would have known were happening. We know immediately
100%.
everywhere in the world that's struggling
Yeah, I would agree with that.
and getting bombarded with that.
But yeah, I wouldn't say it's worse. I would just say it's just more prevalent.
Yeah.
And kids are talking about things more, which I think is good. I mean,
Yes,
Right.
there's definitely
it's a healing
opportunities for
process
that.
through that.
Yes.
But
Yeah, I think the social media has created with body image, for example. Like kids have people
Right.
have always struggled with that. But now just it's in your face all the time. Well, this person looks like this and this person looks like
Well,
this.
and now with AI, right?
And it's all
Oh
over
my
the place.
gosh.
So I
Yeah.
think you're exactly right with the social media. Just That's a lot.
At the risk of sounding pandering, which I certainly don't mean to, we are so dependent on our teachers
Yes.
as a world. You know, certainly in this country, in the communities of this country, and I would join the ranks of others saying teachers are among our most underserved, under-acknowledged, under-supported. The teachers that I have known, their support is much more internal. It is the drive and the love of their vocation, their dedication to it that sustains them. So I want to say thank you for what you do in the world as teachers. I know I could not do it, not at grade school or high school. I've taught, but it's always like college or graduate level. I often say every few weeks when our We Folk School is in session, Megan and Daniel and I, we take turns each week doing chapel time, as Joanne asks us. And I always prepare for what I'm going to do. These are in 2 15-minute blocks. And I go, and the kids come in, and we get started. And I'm thinking, surely I'm gonna have a hard time keeping this to just 15 minutes. And then I'm exhausted thinking, I must have really gone over. It's been like 4 minutes. And I think, how does one do this all day long?
Takes a special person.
It does indeed.
Takes a special person.
And both of you are among
Yes.
those special people attending to this holy vocation as teachers. So thank you for that, and thank you for this.
Yeah,
taking
thank you so
time
much.
in your lives to be with us in this podcast recording. We are grateful to you. We hope this has been of some good interest and insight for all of you who have watched or listened to this episode. I'm Paul Baglios.
I'm Carl Kidd.
I'm Lindsay Hoffman.
And I'm Megan Wyant. Thank you for joining us.
This has been Two Pews in a Pod, a podcast hosted by the lead pastor of Evangelical Lutheran Church in Frederick, Maryland. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.